Wilberforce. I'm an English politician and the voice of abolition movement in Parliament. I enrolled in Cambridge University and by the age of 21 was elected into Parliament. In 1787, I met Thomas Clarkson, a fellow abolitionist with whom I would collaborate with for over 50 years. Since 1789, I've proposed bills to ban the slave trade within Parliament, but have lost the debate every time. However, in March of 1807, the abolition of the Slave Trade Act abolished the trade of enslaved people within the British colonies. I resigned my seat in 1824 due to illness and wrote a last petition in 1830 to ban the slave trade. On July 26, 1833, a messenger came and told me that slave trade would be abolished in the British colonies. The question is, why did I fight against the slave trade so actively? This is because the slave trade was enslaving Africans who are humans and in no way inferior. The slavery and the transatlantic slave trade was also much worse than what was going on in Africa. There were many alternatives to the slave trade. During the slave trade, and especially in the Middle Passage, slaves were treated as non-human and non-living. The trip across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage, had ships packed with over 400 Africans chained to each other. More than 15% of the millions of Africans that were thrown into slavery died in the Middle Passage. The slaves in the ships were malnourished and sickly, as they only got 2 or less meals a day and went without fresh air for days. Disease was also common in the ships because of the poor hygiene. Many slaves committed suicide to escape these harsh conditions by jumping or starving themselves. Once dead, the crew members threw them overboard. The slavers and crew members justified their actions by stating that Africans were not human and biologically inferior. However, they are in no way different from us. They look like us, they act like us, they move like us, they have feelings like us, and they have families like us because they're the same as us. And the slave trade was as bad for the slaves as it was for Africa itself. Africa lost many of its young, able-bodied men, women, and youth. While the Europeans and Asians were experiencing an increase in their population, the Africans were not. Slaves were traded for goods such as cotton cloth, pans, and guns. However, what good are these if there is no one left to use them? Will you again justify these actions by proclaiming that they are uncivilized, savage barbarians, that the only thing they are useful for is manual labor? And yet, these barbarians you speak of write some of the most impactful and influential books of their time, writing about how they survived during the slave trade and the hardships they faced. They have families to take care of, but are captured and taken. The slaves who do survive the trip are exposed to more pain and suffering in the colonies. Their life expectancies are reduced to less than 9 years, and yet the slave trade continues. Will these unjust actions be defended once more by bringing up how this has happened in history, that the Bible justifies these actions? Has our society come no further than the biblical times? How can you weigh lives with money? Does the rise in economy outweigh the lives of millions? There are many alternatives to slave trade, and yet the slave trade does not cease to continue. Why not hire the slaves so that they can support their family? There's surely no lack of money if you have enough to buy their lives. How about an even more direct method to avoid the slave trade? Commercial agriculture. Through commercial agriculture, Africa can export agricultural goods that would normally be produced by the laboring slaves. And slaves would not have to suffer through the hardships of slave trade and would not have to leave their homeland. The slave trade was a large-scale injustice which affected many generations of Africans, and I have expressed my many reasons as to why the slave trade should be abolished. The only thing I can do now is to keep fighting against it until it becomes abolished.